Charles Manson was one of the most infamous cult leaders of the 20th century, known for orchestrating a series of brutal murders through psychological manipulation rather than direct violence. Emerging in the late 1960s, Manson formed a group later known as the Manson family, comprised mostly of disillusioned young followers who were captivated by his apocalyptic ideology. Claiming to receive prophetic insight, Manson preached an impending race war he called helter-skelter, a term he drew from his distorted interpretation of popular culture and music. Operating from remote communes in California, Manson enforced absolute loyalty and used a blend of fear, charisma, and hallucinogenic drugs to control his followers. In 1969, under his instruction, members of the Manson family carried out a series of savage murders, most famously the killing of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others at a Los Angeles residence. These acts shocked the nation, exposing the dangers of cultic influence and manipulated fanaticism. Manson was arrested and convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy, despite not physically participating in the killings. His trial brought widespread attention to the phenomenon of mind control within cults. Imprisoned for life, Manson remained a symbol of calculated evil and manipulation until his death in 2017. Though lacking a formal religious doctrine, Manson's legacy endures as a cautionary example of how charismatic leadership, apocalyptic delusions, and psychological control can converge to produce catastrophic violence. His name remains synonymous with the dark extremes of cult devotion and ideological corruption. Jim Jones was the founder of the People's Temple, a religious movement that began with promises of racial equality and collective unity, but descended into one of the deadliest cult tragedies in history. Born in 1931, Jones cultivated a reputation as a charismatic preacher during the 1950s and 1960s, attracting thousands with messages of social justice, communal living, and spiritual liberation. However, beneath this image lay increasing paranoia, authoritarian control, and demands for absolute loyalty. Fearing government scrutiny and media exposure, Jones relocated his followers to a remote settlement in Guyana, known as Jonestown. There, he established an isolated commune where he exercised total control over the lives of more than 900 members. Daily life became regimented through forced labor, propaganda broadcasts, and rehearsals for mass suicide, which he termed revolutionary acts. On November 18, 1978, after U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan visited Jonestown to investigate abuse allegations, tensions erupted. Jones ordered the assassination of Ryan and then commanded his followers to ingest a poisoned beverage in what became widely known as the Drink the Kool-Aid massacre. Over 900 individuals, including children, died in the mass suicide murder, marking one of the largest single losses of American civilian life in a non-natural event until the September 11th attacks. Jim Jones perished that same day, reportedly by a self-inflicted gunshot. His legacy endures as a grim example of how idealistic movements can transform into authoritarian cults under the influence of absolute power and delusional leadership. Jonestown remains a symbol of blind devotion, manipulation, and tragic obedience. Shoko Asahara was the founder of Aum Shinrikyo, a Japanese doomsday cult that combined elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, and apocalyptic prophecy with violent extremism. Born Chizuo Matsumoto in 1955, Asahara struggled with partial blindness and pursued spiritual studies, eventually establishing Aum Shinrikyo in the late 1980s. Initially presenting the group as a path to enlightenment, he attracted educated followers disillusioned with modern society, including scientists and engineers. Asahara proclaimed himself a messianic figure destined to survive a coming global apocalypse, which he claimed would be triggered by world powers. Under his leadership, the cult stockpiled weapons, conducted military-like training, and developed chemical agents. His teachings justified violence as a form of salvation, framing mass death as spiritual purification. Within Aum's compounds, dissent was punished harshly, and followers were subjected to psychological and physical control. On March 20, 1995, Aum Shinrikyo carried out one of the most notorious domestic terrorist attacks in history. Members released sarin nerve gas on Tokyo subway trains during rush hour, killing 13 people and injuring thousands. The attack stunned Japan, exposing the deadly potential of religious extremism fused with scientific capability. Asahara was arrested shortly after, tried for multiple murders, and sentenced to death. He remained unrepentant throughout his imprisonment and was executed by hanging in 2018. Aum Shinrikyo was rebranded, yet persisted internationally under new names. Shoko Asahara's legacy is one of apocalyptic fanaticism and calculated terror, illustrating the catastrophic consequences of a leader who weaponized spirituality to justify mass violence. David Koresh, born Vernon Wayne Howell in 1959, was the leader of the Branch Davidians, a religious sect based in Waco, Texas. Emerging during a period of internal conflict within the group, Koresh claimed to possess divine insight and adopted the name Koresh, referencing Cyrus the Great. He positioned himself as the final prophet, asserting a unique authority to interpret the Book of Revelation and initiate the faithful into the events of the end times. Under his leadership, the Branch Davidians transformed into a closed, highly controlled community. Koresh enforced strict doctrines, including the belief that he alone could produce a House of David through multiple spiritual wives, several of whom were reportedly underage. He preached impending apocalyptic warfare and stockpiled weapons within the Mount Carmel compound, preparing for what he called a holy confrontation with worldly forces. In 1993, the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempted to raid the compound on suspicions of illegal firearms possession. The operation erupted into a violent standoff that lasted 51 days, broadcast widely across national media. Negotiations faltered, and on April 19th, a federal assault led to a catastrophic fire that engulfed the compound. Koresh and more than 70 followers, including children, perished in the blaze. David Koresh's death marked one of the most controversial and tragic confrontations between a religious sect and federal authorities in modern American history. His leadership remains a symbol of apocalyptic obsession, authoritarian control, and the devastating consequences of unchecked spiritual absolutism. Marshall Applewhite was the co-founder and leader of Heaven's Gate, a UFO-oriented religious cult that gained global notoriety following a mass suicide in 1997. Born in 1931, Applewhite came from a religious background and initially pursued a career in music and education. After a period of personal and psychological turmoil, he met Bonnie Nettles, a nurse with spiritual interests, and together they formed a belief system blending Christian eschatology with extraterrestrial salvation. Applewhite taught that Earth was doomed to be recycled, and that true believers must transcend their human bodies to ascend to a higher evolutionary level. He claimed that an alien spacecraft traveling behind the Hale-Bopp comet would transport their souls to a new existence. As leader, he demanded strict discipline, celibacy, and detachment from all worldly ties. Members lived communally, surrendered personal identity, and adopted identical clothing and appearance to symbolize unity. In March 1997, Applewhite led 39 followers in a meticulously planned group suicide inside a rented mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California. They consumed lethal doses of barbiturates, believing their deaths would free their consciousness to board the awaited spacecraft. The scene, marked by uniform attire and ritual precision, shocked the world and highlighted the extreme consequences of apocalyptic belief. Marshall Applewhite's influence endures as a chilling example of charismatic authority combined with delusional prophecy. Although not overtly violent, his teachings led followers to embrace death willingly in pursuit of transcendence. Heaven's Gate stands as one of the most unsettling demonstrations of spiritual manipulation and collective self-destruction. Aleister Crowley, born in 1875, was a British occultist, ceremonial magician, and writer whose practices and persona earned him the title The Beast 666. Raised in a strict religious household, Crowley rejected conventional faith early in life, developing a fascination with mysticism, esotericism, and forbidden rites. He became a prominent figure in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, though disputes with other members led him to forge his own path in occult philosophy. Crowley's central doctrine, known as Thelema, was founded on the principle, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." He promoted the pursuit of individual will above societal or moral constraints, blending elements of Eastern mysticism, ritual magic, and personal liberation. His rituals often involved complex ceremonies, magical symbols, and controversial practices, sparking rumors of dark rites, including drug use and sexual magic. Throughout his life, Crowley traveled extensively, writing prolifically about magic, symbolism, and spiritual transcendence. His lifestyle, marked by excess and scandal, drew condemnation from the public and press, who portrayed him as a dangerous cultist. Financial hardship and isolation plagued his later years, yet he continued to attract a devoted circle of followers. Crowley died in 1947, but his influence persisted, extending into modern occultism, counterculture movements, and even popular music. Though never convicted of violent crimes, his legacy remains deeply polarizing, praised by some as a visionary of spiritual freedom, reviled by others as an architect of moral decay. Aleister Crowley's name endures as a symbol of radical esoteric rebellion and occult defiance. Adolfo Constanzo was a Mexican-American cult leader and criminal mastermind whose reign of terror blended drug trafficking with ritualistic human sacrifice. Born in 1962 in Miami and raised between the United States and Mexico, Constanzo became immersed in folk magic and Afro-Caribbean religions such as Palo Mayombe. Over time, he twisted these practices into a doctrine of violence, presenting himself as a powerful sorcerer capable of granting protection and supernatural favor. By the mid-1980s, Constanzo established a cult-like following among drug traffickers and cartel members in Matamoros, Mexico. His group, known as Los Narcosatánicos, believed that gruesome rituals, including the mutilation and killing of victims, would ensure power, wealth, and immunity from law enforcement. Constanzo orchestrated these acts within a ritual shed, where victims' remains were used in ceremonial cauldrons, known as ngangas. His followers obeyed him unquestioningly, convinced of his occult authority. The cult's activities remained hidden until 1989, when the kidnapping and murder of American student Mark Kilroy drew international attention. Investigations uncovered the ritual killings, shocking the public with the scale and brutality of the crimes. Facing capture, Constanzo ordered his own death rather than surrender, and was killed by a follower during a police raid in Mexico City. Adolfo Constanzo's legacy is synonymous with occult criminality, demonstrating how the fusion of superstition, power, and violence can give rise to extreme acts of brutality. His cult remains one of the most horrifying examples of ritual murder in modern history, a chilling intersection of organized crime and dark mysticism.